2021-2022 Continuing Approval Review webinar. You are in attendance this afternoon because you've been notified that your educator preparation program is scheduled for a continuing approval review during the 2021-2022 reporting year. During this webinar, we will discuss how to prepare for the continuing approval review and what you can expect before, during, and after the review. We will try to cover everything thoroughly today. However, we know that you may have additional questions, including those that may be specific to your preparation program. So please send them our way and we will respond after the webinar in an FAQ document. Please note that your questions will be captured using the questions section on the GoToWebinar toolbar. Questions or comments placed in the chat will not be retained. This webinar is being recorded and the recording and related FAQ document will be posted on the Program Provider Resources page on the TEA website following the webinar. Please take note that hereafter in this webinar, I will refer to an educator preparation program as an EPP. The EPP is the entity that houses all the different certification programs. Also, when I refer to you, I am referring to your EPP since you are here as a representative of your program. TEA staff attending today include your education specialist, Vanessa Alba, Lori Ayers, Angela Von Hatten, and Emily Carrizales, and director, Jessica McLaughlin. I'm Emily Carrizales, and I will be your presenter today. In the notification letter you received on August 12, 2021, your EPP was assigned one of the education specialists who will facilitate your review. Please note that the education specialist assigned to facilitate your review may not be your usual assigned education specialist. This decision was made for an even distribution of workload and for efficiency in completing reviews. For the purpose of this webinar, we have broken the review process into 4 parts. We will first go over preparing for the review. We will also cover what happens during the review, followed by what happens after the review. And finally, we will talk about the continuing approval part of the continuing approval review. The legal authority of each program scheduled for a review in 2021-2022 should have received a notification email on August 12, 2021 that contained important attachments. The legal authority is the ultimate authority over the EPP who is responsible for the oversight and success of all programs within the EPP and for the program's alignment to the Texas Administrative Code. The attachments sent to the legal authority included a notification letter with important dates, a handbook, a status report, the review rubric, the Science of Teaching Reading Alignment Chart and Examination Framework, and the Scope and Sequence document. We have also linked the handbook, status report, and review rubric in the handout section of this webinar for your convenience. We will refer to these documents during the webinar, so you may find it helpful to keep them handy. Let's first take a look at the steps taken to prepare for a continuing approval review. The continuing approval review is required in the Texas Administrative Code, also known as TAC. As a condition of continuing approval as an EPP, 19 TAC 228.10b requires TEA to review each EPP every 5 years. A review may also be conducted outside of the 5-year cycle at the discretion of TEA or for the purposes of a pre-approval or post-approval of a new EPP. During the review, the documents and records review process is focused on the alignment of EPP policies and processes within requirements in TAC. Based on the outcome of the review, together with the accreditation status, the EPP is either approved by the State Board of Educator Certification to continue certifying educators, or that approval may be revoked. The purpose and goal for the review process and for determining annual accreditation status is to promote high-quality EPPs that prepare qualified educators. The review process should be looked upon as a foundation for continuous improvement for those who want to improve. TEA continues to collect feedback from EPPs regarding the review process, and we are committed to the continuous improvement of the review process. In the Continuing Approval Review Handbook that was attached to your notification email and in this webinar, you will find information about different types of reviews. The term Continuing Approval Review is used in relation to the 5-year and the discretionary review. The outcome of either type of review factor into the continuing approval of the EPP. Whether TEA staff conducts a 5-year continuing approval review or a discretionary continuing approval review, the review will be in one of two formats, either a desk format or a virtual on-site format. The desk review requires the EPP to send documents for review to TEA. The virtual on-site review also requires the EPP to send documents for review to TEA, but will be conducted following an on-site format using a synchronous digital platform like Microsoft Teams. The format of the continuing approval review is determined by the outcome of the risk assessment, which we will talk more about later. In general, those EPPs identified with the highest risk are reviewed in a virtual on-site format, and those EPPs identified with the lowest risk are reviewed in the desk format. It is important to note here that TAC requires an on-site review format for both the pre-approval and post-approval reviews of new EPPs. Regardless of the type or format of the review, all EPPs are held to the same standards and quality and accountability during the review. Please note, going forward in this webinar, there will be information that is relevant only to those programs receiving a desk review and other information that is relevant only to those programs receiving a virtual on-site review. I'll do my best to be clear when going over that information to avoid any confusion. Let's look at an overview of the review process. First, TEA identifies which EPPs are up for a 5-year continuing approval review, a discretionary review, or are a new EPP ready for a pre- or post-approval review. Second, each identified EPP is evaluated using the risk assessment. Third, each identified EPP is notified by TEA of the upcoming 5-year continuing approval review and receives training to help the EPP prepare for the upcoming review. We are currently on this step in the timeline. Fourth, TEA works with the EPPs during their scheduled time to complete the desk review or the virtual on-site review. And last, TEA recommends the EPPs to SBEC for continuing approval or revocation. You can see in this process that regardless of the format of your review, the process is the same. The primary difference between the desk review and the virtual on-site review, other than the length and format, is the depth of the review. For EPPs at highest risk, a deeper review is conducted to try to uncover and find solutions for root cause issues that may be adversely affecting the functionality of the EPP and the preparation of its candidates. Ultimately, EPPs being reviewed during a reporting year will be approved or not by SBEC for continuation. Now let's talk about the risk assessment and how it's used to determine your review format. 19 TAC 228.10b3 requires TEA staff to use a risk assessment to determine the need for discretionary reviews and the type of 5-year reviews. This rule also identifies the factors that must be included in the risk assessment. There is a detailed description of the risk assessment and the related calculations in the handbook attached to your notification email, so I'll just go over a high-level overview here. On this graphic, the box in blue entitled Accreditation Data represents the 2018-2019 data that was used to calculate the index score for the EPPs being reviewed this year. For that index score, a sliding scale was used to factor in the impact of the three areas identified in the red boxes, entitled Accreditation Status, Accreditation by Other Organizations, and Formal Complaints. An EPP that had an accreditation status of accredited probation was automatically placed in the highest risk stage. After all the data and information was tabulated, one number was generated for each EPP. Stage 1 EPPs were at highest risk, with Stage 3 EPPs at lowest risk. EPPs that were identified as highest risk are scheduled for a virtual on-site review. For your reference, information about your risk stage was provided in the notification letter attached to your notification email. The ACEP manual is also available on the Consumer Information page on the TEA website. Pages 36 to 40 include an explanation of how the index score is calculated, and pages 38 to 40 provide a worked example of the calculations. Now let's look at the notification letter attached to the notification email sent to your EPP legal authority. As I mentioned earlier, this letter contains some important information. First, the letter identifies the type of the review and the date of the review. For EPPs that will be completing a desk review, this is the date on which all documents and records to be reviewed are due at TEA, and will also be the official start date for your document review. This date is almost always a Monday, unless a holiday requires the start date to be on a Tuesday. For EPPs that will be completing a virtual on-site review, this is the official start date of your review. All documents and records to be reviewed are due at TEA by noon on the day before the official start date. The start date of a virtual on-site review is almost always a Tuesday. This is when TEA will officially open the review and begin reviewing candidate records. Next, the results of the risk assessment for your EPP are included in the letter, along with the contact information for the review education specialist assigned to your review. Next, you'll find the date of today's continuing approval review webinar and the date the status report is due at TEA. The status report will be due 2 weeks prior to the start date of the review, because the status report is used by TEA staff to prepare for the review. And finally, circled in red are the active links to the secure share file. The status report and all candidate records must be submitted to TEA using the secure share file links. If you have any questions about submitting documents using ShareFile, please contact your review education specialist. This slide is specifically for virtual on-site review folks. 19 TAC 229.9 requires a fee for on-site reviews. The fee is $4,500. Payment must be made during the payment window anytime between September 1st and September 30th, 2021. When submitting the fee for a virtual on-site review, EPPs must complete and submit an Educator Preparation Program fee form. This form is available in Appendix A of the Continuing Approval Review Handbook. EPPs may submit their payment via check, money order, or electronically. Directions for electronic payments are available in Appendix B of the Continuing Approval Review Handbook. Please note, if submitting the fee electronically, you will need to contact your review education specialist to receive the appropriate routing information. This information was left out of the handbook for security purposes. There is no fee identified in TAC for a desk review. As mentioned earlier, EPPs are required to comply with TAC, which helps to guide various aspects of each preparation program. Compliance is determined by reviewing EPP documentation and records within the context of the following components. Component 1, governance. Component 2, admissions criteria. Component 3, curriculum. Component 4, coursework, training, program delivery, and ongoing support. Component 5, assessment and evaluation of candidates and programs. Component 6, professional conduct. Component 7, complaints procedures. Component 8, certification procedures. And lastly, Component 9, integrity of data submission. Each EPP will be evaluated on all 9 components during the continuing approval review. Now let's discuss a few resources available to help support you through the review process. The Continuing Approval Review Handbook was attached to your notification email. TEA recommends that you read the handbook start to finish because it contains more detail than can be provided in this webinar. For example, I mentioned earlier that there is a detailed description of the risk assessment calculation in the handbook. Additional resource for you will be the review rubric. You will find that this rubric looks similar to Figure 19 TAC 228.10b1. That provides examples of evidence of compliance with TAC. The review rubric will be used to score compliance in your review. A copy of the rubric is also attached to your notification email and can also be found on the Program Provider Resources page on the TEA website. Please check the footer on the rubric document to make sure it reflects the 2021-2022 year. Do not use any other rubric from a different year. When you look at the review rubric, you will notice it is divided into 9 components that are used to determine program approval. These are the same 9 components included on the previous slide. One thing to keep in mind is that the rubric contains the most updated version of TAC, but the Continuing Approval Review is a look back, so some of the current TAC may not have been in effect at the point in time reflected in some of the EPP records. EPPs are held accountable for following rules that were in effect at the time the candidate was admitted and/or processed. For example, let's say we are reviewing admission records for Mary. Mary's records do not contain a formal admission letter, which is acceptable because Mary's admission date, as reflected in her candidate records, was September 1st, 2015. The formal admission letter was required starting with applicants admitted on or after March 1st, 2016. Since Mary was admitted prior to March 1st, 2016, the formal admission documents were not required because the rule in TAC was not in effect at the time she was admitted. We have included the effective dates for many of the TAC requirements in the review rubric. A blank copy of the status report was also attached to your notification email. This document is meant to be completed electronically because it contains spaces that expand to accommodate as much information as you want or need to provide. The status report is required in 19 TAC 228.10b1. In the spirit of best practice, the status report is not just busy work. TEA review teams use this document to learn important information about your programs, which provides context in which to review your documents and records. Some portions of the rubric may be scored from this document. Feedback from EPPs in combination with our ability to access more EPP data through our systems has helped TEA scale back the status report document so that the EPP can convey information to TEA in a way that is concise yet individualized to the EPP. If you have the status report document handy, take a look at it for a moment. The first pages are devoted to general EPP information, including contact information and general background information about the programs within the EPP. The document then has a section devoted to each of the 9 components where EPP staff convey to TEA that they meet or exceed TAC requirements. Use the available spaces to explain to TEA how you meet or exceed requirements. The spaces will expand as needed. Remember to think about and include all your programs in these responses. TEA will review all approved programs within the EPP, so the status report is a great opportunity for the EPP to share how each program is aligned with TAP. You may also find some areas that ask for candidate information, such as the section that asks you to identify candidates placed in out-of-state clinical teaching or practicum assignments. These sections in the status report contain candidate identifiers, so submitting the status report via ShareFile will ensure the documents and candidate information are submitted securely. We will review document submissions later on. Finally, there are attachments that TEA would like you to submit with the completed status report. These are noted in the appendix section at the end of the document. As part of the status report, EPPs with a risk stage of 1 or 2 will complete the scope and sequence document and return it to TEA as an appendix item. This document is also meant to be completed electronically. To complete the scope and sequence document, program staff should identify the certificate area that includes the addition of the Science of Teaching reading standards and is the lowest performing with the largest number of candidates. You will then populate the chart with all of the courses taken by a candidate in this STR impacted certificate area. This screenshot depicts the first section of the scope and sequence document, which reflects courses taken prior to clinical teaching or internship. There are 2 additional sections, courses taken during and courses taken after clinical teaching or internship. The scope and sequence document will be used during the curriculum evaluation portion of the review. Due to the recent changes in certificate areas that include the addition of the Science of Teaching reading standards, those certificate areas will be the focus of curriculum reviews for each 2021-2022 continuing approval review. Component 3 of the status report has been updated to reflect this focus. All EPPs being reviewed that are approved to offer a certificate area that includes the Science of Teaching reading standards will be asked to select their highest volume and lowest performing certificate area in an STR impacted certificate area, and provide a performance-based assessment with its related rubric from that area. All EPPs will also be asked to complete and submit the appropriate alignment charts for their STR impacted certificate area. Please contact your review education specialist to request the alignment charts for the STR impacted certificate area the EPP will be using for the continuing approval review. This action item pertains to EPPs receiving a desk review and a virtual on-site review. For all EPPs being reviewed in the 2021-2022 reporting year, the status report is due 2 weeks prior to the start date of the review. As previously mentioned, for your convenience, the status report due date is included in your notification letter. The status report and appendix items must be submitted via the secure share file link provided in the notification letter. We will go over document submissions again in more detail later on. It is important that all of your documents are carefully labeled so that TEA Review Education Specialists understand the documents they are reviewing. This is true also of appendix items submitted with the status report. Please use the appendix letter in the file or document name. Now that we've discussed the notification letter, the review process, resources available to you, and the status report, let's do a quick overview of the pre-review process. First, on August 12, 2021, each EPP being reviewed during the 2021-2022 year received a notification packet from TEA, which included the notification letter, the review rubric, the 2021-2022 Continuing Approval Review Handbook, the Scope and Sequence document, and the STR Alignment Chart and Exam Framework. Second, today we're on the second step, attending the Continuing Approval Review webinar. Third, 2 weeks prior to the start of the review, the EPP will submit the status report to TEA via the share file link included in the notification letter. Don't forget the due date for the status report and the review start date are both included in that notification letter. Fourth, on the same day the EPP submits the status report to TEA, TEA will send the designated candidate list to the EPP. The designated candidate list will include the specific candidate records the EPP will need to submit to TEA by the start of the review. And fifth, the EPP will then have 2 weeks to collect records and evidence pertaining to the candidates on the designated candidate list and submit the documentation to TEA. Before we move on to part 2, I wanted to take a quick pause to encourage you to submit any questions you've had so far. TEA will follow up with the responses to all of your questions in an FAQ after the webinar. While we give everyone a chance to type in their questions from part 1, it's time to do some EPP trivia. The first trivia question we have for today is going to be, which chapter in TAC includes rules requiring each EPP to complete a continuing approval review every 5 years? A, Chapter 227, B, Chapter 228, C, Chapter 229, and D, Chapter 230. All right, looks like we've got some votes coming in. Thank you for everyone who's participating in our trivia for today. Hope this gives you guys a quick brain break. And I'll give you about 10 more seconds to respond. All right, we're gonna go ahead and close that poll. I can tell some of you guys are checking your notes. That's great. And let's see our responses. So as you can see, we've got 13% say 227, 54 say 228, 26% say 229, and 7% say 230. So if you selected Chapter 228, you would be correct. As we saw on slide 6, 19 TAC 228.10b states EPP continuing approval reviews must occur every 5 years, and that a review may be conducted at any time at the discretion of TEA staff. All right, thanks everyone for participating in that. So that was a great question to start with. Stay tuned. We'll have another trivia question following part 2. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to part 2 and talk a little bit about how to prepare and submit the records and documents for the continuing approval review. We'll talk about the review itself also. So first, please keep in mind that TEA does not expect or want you to create documents just because they're requested for a review. The review process is about reviewing the EPP as it exists. For example, TEA may ask to see the handbook you provide to your mentors. TAC does not require the EPP to provide a handbook to mentors. So if you do not usually provide a handbook to your mentors, TEA does not expect or want you to create one just for the review. Conversely, TAC does require that the EPP provide training to its mentors. So if TEA asks to see evidence of the training, it would be expected that you're able to provide that documentation. Before we move on to the next slide, let's go over some training logistics. It is important at this point in the webinar to recall that to recall that we're going to discuss desk review and virtual on-site review. And I identified that the review process is the same until you get to the actual review. And then there are some subtle differences in the way the desk review and the virtual on-site reviews are conducted. In an effort to minimize confusion, as we go over the requirements on the remaining slides, I will identify for you whether I'm talking about a desk review or a virtual on-site review. So, putting my classroom teacher hat back on for a moment, I need to encourage you to pay close attention or you might miss something. Please note that at the top of the slide indicates this information is for programs receiving a desk review. So those of you in attendance that are receiving a desk review, you'll want to pay particular attention to this slide. Desk review folks, your continuing approval review will address all 9 components in TAC. Components 1, governance, 3, curriculum, and 7, the complaints process, will be reviewed using records available in-house at TEA and using information provided by the EPP in the status report. It's important that you keep in mind as you are completing the status report, so TEA is provided complete information in these areas. If the review process uncovers issues related to any of these 3 areas, TEA staff may request additional documentation from you. In Appendix D of the handbook, you will find a document called Continuing Approval Desk Review Document and Record Submission Instructions 2021-2022. This document contains the list of records and other documentation that must be submitted to TEA for review. All of these records and documents must be received at TEA on or before the start date of your review, identified in your notification letter. You will note that this document also provides guidance on how to label documents and files for submission. Please make sure file names are not long, because long file names are difficult to download at TEA. Desk reviews take approximately 6 weeks to complete. Now let's discuss some virtual on-site review information. If you're receiving a review in the virtual on-site format, the slide is for you. After a successful year of implementing and refining the virtual on-site review process, TEA has decided to continue to conduct on-site reviews virtually. During a virtual on-site review, EPPs can expect a detailed audit evaluating the 9 components of the continuing approval review and thorough communication from TEA staff utilizing synchronous digital platforms like Microsoft Teams. Although TEA staff will not be visiting the EPP on site, the EPP can expect your assigned review education specialist to be readily available, to communicate frequently, and to meet with a variety of EPP staff throughout the review process. In a virtual on-site review, all 9 components will be reviewed in depth. For example, the certificate area identified in the scope and sequence document will be your lowest performing area that impacts the largest number of candidates. The TEA review team will ask to look at some curriculum items, such as performance-based assessments and rubrics that may request to interview some faculty delivering instruction in this area. In another example, if your EPP is rated accredited probation due to quality of field supervision, we may visit with your field supervisor or other EPP staff about your process for communicating requirements regarding field supervision. Because the virtual on-site review involves gathering information from faculty and staff, as well as from EPP records, it will be important for the EPP to make sure those staff are readily available during the review. The assigned review education specialist will provide an agenda and an on-call schedule for the review 2 weeks prior to the start date of the review. An EPP staff member should be available throughout the review to assist the TEA review team with retrieving documents, accessing records, and reaching out to other EPP staff that the review team may need to interview, like the certification officer, teaching faculty, or field supervisors. EPP staff identified as on-call during the review should be readily available during the designated on-call windows. TEA will initiate contact with on-call staff during the virtual on-site review as needed. Along with submitting the status report 2 weeks prior to the review date, a virtual on-site review will require the EPP to submit the appropriate candidate records and documents before the start of the review, similar to that of the desk review. In Appendix D of the handbook, you will find a document called Continuing Approval Desk Review Document and Records Submission Instructions 2021-2022. Excuse me. This document contains the list of records and other documentation that must be submitted to TEA for review. All these records and documents must be received at TEA by noon on the Monday before your review start date. You will note that this document also provides guidance on how to label records and files for submission. Please make sure file names are not too long, because long file names are difficult to download at TEA. The EPP can expect TEA staff to begin the virtual on-site review between 8 and 9 a.m. on the first day, which is usually a Tuesday morning, and close the review by close of business on the last day, usually a Thursday. At this point, I'm sure you're all wondering, how will you know which candidates will be reviewed? This information regarding candidate records for review is relevant to all EPPs, those receiving a desk review and those receiving a virtual on-site review. In your handbook, you will find some information about a document called the Designated Candidate List. Prior to your review, TEA will randomly select candidates from all of your programs and will request those records for review. At minimum, 5 candidates will be selected from each of your programs, or no less than 10 records for the EPP. Please note, larger programs with higher enrollment numbers may be required to provide a number of candidate records that is relative to the size of their program. The candidate names, TEA ID numbers, certificate area, and source will be provided on the designated candidate list. Candidate names will be selected from your finisher records list, certificate list, status report, and admission list from the current reporting year and at least 1 or 2 years prior. The TEA review team may request additional records, such as records for 1 or more candidates identified on the status report. Virtual on-site review and desk review, folks. This list will be sent to you 2 weeks prior to the start date of your review. In other words, on the day your education specialist receives your completed status report, she will send you the designated candidate list. You will use the document submission instructions in Appendix D of the handbook to compile and label the documentation and records related to these candidates. All candidate records sent to TEA must be sent via the secure share file link. Notice in the screenshot on the right, the due date for the candidate records and the link to the submit document securely are also at the top of the designated candidate list. When submitting candidate records and other requested EPP documents, use the file labeling guidance provided in the instructions in Appendix D of the handbook. In the example on this slide, the EPP is submitting some documentation relative to admission. So these file names will start with the designation C2, which means these files are for the admission component, which is component 2. Then briefly identify the record. In this example, the EPP is submitting a list of candidates and their TEA ID numbers that were admitted to TEA under the 10% exception rule, which allows your EPP to admit up to 10% of an incoming class with a GPA of less than 2.50. So that document name will be C2_10% exception. In the second example, the EPP is submitting the admission records for one of the candidates on the designated candidate list. To do so, you would scan or download your records for the candidate and then save the document or file with the name C2_candidate name.TEA ID number. To keep the file name short, use the first initial only and then the full last name of the candidate. Both the name and the TEA ID number must be included to ensure that we have records matched up for the appropriate candidate. Many candidates have similar names and/or TEA ID numbers. All documents and files submitted to TEA for the review will use this file scheme, we'll use this label scheme. Please note for efficiency, if a record or piece of evidence does not exist, just drop a note on a placeholder document that says something like, "We could not locate this record," or more specifically, "This candidate has not reached the point of clinical teaching yet, so there are no observation records for this candidate," or whatever is applicable to the candidate. Then send the note in place of the record request. Again, I can't emphasize enough that it is important to label files in such a way that communicates efficiently to TEA what each file represents. In addition to carefully labeling all files for submission, please also be aware that file names should be short, concise, and follow the required scheme explained on the previous slide. Again, this information is necessary for all EPPs being reviewed. It is very important that your documents are submitted to TEA through the appropriate submission process. All documents and records submitted to TEA will be submitted using a secure share file link. We have placed an easy-to-use secure share file link on the notification letter and the designated candidate list that can be used to submit candidate records. The files you submit will land in a secure folder at TEA and not in a mailbox. TEA staff will receive a notification email when your files have arrived. When you click on the link, it will prompt you to identify yourself, then attach the files. You may want to select the Remember Me option so as to avoid having to identify yourself each time you submit documents. The submitter will then receive an email confirmation of the upload. You may want to check your spam folder. The confirmation email will come to you from you. In the event that you're unable to submit documents using the share file link, please contact your review education specialist. For all EPPs being reviewed in both the desk and virtual on-site format, documents and records are reviewed for evidence of alignment with requirements and TAC. Let's take a look at an example. When determining if the program has implemented a formal admission process, the review team would look for a letter to the applicant offering admission. To be compliant with the formal admission requirements, that letter would reflect the formal date of admission, and the applicant would have signed an acceptance of that offer. If this evidence was found in the candidate's records, the program would be compliant with the formal admission process in 19 TAC 227.17A through D. To ensure the entire formal admission process is in alignment with requirements and TAC, the reviewers would then consult the audit trail in each candidate's ECOS account to ensure the admission record was uploaded by EPP staff within 7 calendar days of the formal admission date embedded in the offer letter. If so, the requirement in 19 TAC 227.17E would be met. Finally, the review team would look at the date the candidate started coursework and training using dated evidence such as test dates, degree plans, transcripts depicting semester coursework, FBE logs, and certificate effective dates. If that actual start date was on or after the formal admission date embedded in the offer letter, then the program would be compliant with 19 TAC 227.17F, which identifies the program may not begin providing coursework and training until after the candidate is formally admitted. Note here that one program within an EPP may have implemented the formal admission process, while another program may not. All programs within the EPP must have the formal admission process implemented for the EPP to be in compliance with the formal admission requirements. Before we close part 2, let's do a quick overview of the review process. First, whether your EPP is being reviewed via a desk review or a virtual on-site review, on the review start date on the notification letter, TEA will begin reviewing the candidate records submitted by the EPP. Second, after reviewing the candidate records, TEA will hold a debrief with the EPP to discuss areas of non-compliance and additional documentation the EPP may have to show the EPP is in compliance with TAC. Keep in mind, for the virtual on-site reviews, this debrief will occur at the end of each review day. And for desk review folks, the debrief meeting will be coordinated with the review education specialist. Third, desk review folks will have 48 hours to submit any additional documents following their debrief meeting with TEA, and virtual on-site review folks will need to submit additional documents the morning after each end-of-day debrief meeting. Fourth, as additional documents are submitted by the EPP, TEA will review the documents and clear compliance items as necessary. Fifth, both desk review and virtual on-site reviews will conclude with a closing meeting conducted by TEA. The closing meetings will include TEA and the EPP discussing the review findings. This includes areas of success in the program and areas of improvement in the program. And finally, components and rules and TAC that are found to be out of compliance will be placed on a next steps plan for desk reviews and on a compliance plan for virtual on-site reviews. TEA encourages EPPs to reference this graphic as you prepare for your review and throughout the review process as a means to understand where in the continuing approval review process the EPP is at. Here's a chance to submit any questions that you may have from Part 1 or Part 2. Please keep in mind that all the questions received today will be included in an FAQ following the webinar. It's also time for our second trivia question of the day. The second trivia question for today is, when did the formal admission process requirement become effective in the Texas Administrative Code? A, March 1st, 2016, B, September 1st, 2016, C, December 27th, 2016, or D, January 1st, 2017. Thank you for all of our participants, and I'll give you guys about 10 seconds to go ahead and get your answers in. And keep in mind, this is a good time that if you have any questions to type in, this is a great time to do it. All right, so let's go ahead and see our responses. So as you can see, we've got 40% say March 1st, 2016. If you selected March 1st, 2016, you would be correct. That's right, the beloved formal admissions process has been around for over 5 years. That means each program has been formally admitting applicants to their EPP by 1, notifying each applicant of their offer of formal admission in writing, and 2, collecting the written acceptance of the offer of formal admission from each candidate, or excuse me, each applicant for over 5 years. All right, great job, everyone. Thanks again for participating. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to Part 3. So Part 3 will cover the details about what happens after the documentation and records have been reviewed. This is another slide that you will all want to tune into, both desk review and virtual on-site reviews. So let's talk about desk review process first. After the initial review is complete, the assigned review education specialist will hold a conference call with EPP staff to debrief the initial findings. This is typically referred to as the mid-review call. At that point, the education specialist will invite EPP staff to submit additional documentation if necessary. Following the review of any additional documents, a closing meeting will be held with EPP staff to review next steps and to formally close the review. Once the review is closed, a formal report will be written by TEA and later sent to the EPP to review. For the virtual on-site review, the TEA review team will hold a daily debrief with EPP staff at the end of each day to discuss findings and identify additional documentation needed for the next day. At the closing session on the final day, TEA staff and EPP staff will discuss findings and collaboratively develop a compliance plan to guide corrective actions if necessary. The compliance plan will remain with the EPP, and a formal report will be sent later for the EPP to review. At all points during the review process, EPPs are encouraged to include a variety of staff members so that staff from all programs within the EPP have an opportunity to celebrate the wins and collaborate on the opportunities for improvement. During the closing session with EPP staff, the TEA education specialist assigned to review will debrief the findings. At that point, any areas that were identified as out of compliance with TAC will be discussed. For desk reviews, when the report is issued, the section entitled Next Steps will itemize these areas and identify the date by which all areas must be brought into compliance. An example of the Next Steps form is depicted on this slide. That timeline will be 4 months from the close of the desk review. If you are receiving a virtual on-site review, the TEA review team and the EPP staff present at the closing meeting will discuss results and collaboratively develop a plan to bring the out-of-compliance areas back into compliance. An example of the compliance plan form is depicted on this slide. EPP staff will have 4 months from the close of the virtual on-site review to submit evidence of compliance. Finally, let's look at part 4. What happens after the review is complete? 19 TAC 229.6 requires specific actions on the part of TEA staff and the SBEC depending on the outcome of the review. If the review reveals that your programs meet or exceed requirements in TAC, then TEA staff will recommend the SBEC to approve the renewal of your EPP. It is important to remind you that all programs within the EPP are reviewed and contribute to the success of the EPP. Once the SBEC approves the continuation or renewal of the EPP will be placed in the 5-year rotation, and the EPP will be reviewed again in 5 years, unless problems come up in the interim that warrant a discretionary review. If the EPP fails to correct any areas identified in the next steps or compliance plan by the agreed upon timeline, TEA staff will recommend the SBEC sanction the EPP. Note that TAC identifies that sanctions may include public reprimand, conditions on continued approval, or revocation, but there could be other sanctions as well. The sanctions will likely depend on the nature of the violations of TAC. We have come to the end of our training today. The key takeaways from today's webinar are the following. 1, TEA is required to review EPPs. 2, EPPs are expected to maintain appropriate records and provide them as evidence during the review. 3, send all required documents and records by the date specified in the notification letter. 4, candidate records must be submitted securely. 5, there are a lot of available resources to help you with this process. Be sure to contact your review education specialist if necessary. And 6, corrective action is required and time-bound. As we close the webinar for today, I just wanted to give you one last reminder to submit your questions using the question feature. Our final trivia question for today. This is a great question. Our final trivia question for today is, which answer best fits the definition of the post-baccalaureate route? A, an EPP route where a candidate seeks a bachelor's degree and a certificate concurrently. B, an EPP route where a candidate seeks a certificate only. Or C, an EPP route where a candidate seeks a master's degree and a certificate concurrently. I think I might have put B and C in there backwards, so I apologize if that caused me confusion. I'll give you guys about 10 more seconds to get those answers in. And again, remember, if you have any questions, make sure you're typing those in. And let's go ahead and see what our answers are. So if you selected C, or excuse me, let me make sure I have it right here. If you selected B, you would be correct. So a post-baccalaureate route is when a candidate is seeking a master's degree and a certificate concurrently. The alternative certification route is when a candidate is seeking a certificate only, and the traditional route is when a candidate is seeking a bachelor's degree and a certificate concurrently. It is important to note this information because this is an area of alignment verified by TEA during the review process. If your EPP is currently not approved for a route and would like to apply to add a route to an already approved certificate area, please contact your assigned education specialist to learn about the amendment process to add the route. Great job, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that trivia. So this concludes our training for today. On behalf of the Educator Preparation Program, let me hide this, there we go. So on behalf of the Educator Preparation staff at TEA, I want to thank you for attending. I hope we've been able to answer most, if not all, of your questions about the review process. We will post an FAQ with answers to all questions asked today, along with the recording on the Program Provider Resources page on the TEA website. You are encouraged to contact your education specialist assigned to your review if you have any additional questions about your review. I hope you all have a great day, and thanks for tuning in.